Whether you're joining us this evening from Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide or Perth, it's great to see you all. Actually, I've got my back to you, so I can't see you at all. As we start the event this evening, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet and on which our health services are located, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We would, as always, like to thank our sponsors for their continued support for the Australian Health Design Council, our foundation partners, In Vitro Technologies, Marquet, and our new sponsor, Enware, our industry partners, IPG and Cantel, and our event partner, Oricon, or Oricon Plus, this evening. For this evening, our event is supported also by Billard Lease Partnership Architects and Urban Interior Designers and Cox Architecture, as they offered to host the events in their offices in Melbourne and Brisbane. So thank you very much to all of our sponsors. A little bit of housekeeping. Architects, project managers and engineers can claim continuing professional development points for today's event. Actually, a lot of people can. I know I can. Details can be found in the event invitation email. You have to go to aushdc.org.au/CPD for more information on claiming points. Tonight's event is going to be recorded. The recording will be available next week on our website for members access only. Sorry about, had to turn the page. Please use the Mentimeter. You might like to scan the barcode on the screen now to get ready to lodge your questions. We'll then move on to the event tonight. This evening, our event will be divided into 3 parts. In part 1, a few of the AHDC committee members will provide some updates on 2023 AHDC initiatives. In part 2, we'll hear from 3 of the 2023 European Health Design Study Tour attendees who've agreed to share their learnings and observations from the tour. Tracy Lord, Tonya Hind and Alessandro Filippi, is that right? From Billard Lease Partnership Architects and Urban Interior Designers have put their hands up to present this evening. I'd like to take the opportunity to also welcome Mark Mitchell, Director at Billard Lease Partnership Architects and Urban Interior Designers, who's joining us this evening from Melbourne and will be co-chairing the event with me. He will introduce the topic and the speakers after the conclusion of part 1 and will run the Q&A session after the presentations. In part 3, each state will enjoy some informal discussions, drinks and nibblies separately, as we usually do. So let's start with part 1 for this evening's seminar. The first issue I'd like to raise is the research scholarship. People may remember that AHDC introduced a research scholarship last year, and we're proud to continue its support for research in health design with our scholarship in its 2nd year. This unique opportunity provides a PhD or master's student with an opportunity to apply for funding to specialise in the field of health facility design. On behalf of Jane Carthy, who's our chair of the research committee, I'd like to pass on congratulations to this year's winner, Carla Milio, a Master of Architecture candidate at the University of Melbourne, for her thesis on the topic of Towards an Architecture of Healing, Sensory Approaches to Restraints and Seclusion in Mental Health Facilities. Carla's research aims to understand trends in restraint and seclusion in acute psychiatric inpatient environments, describe the sensory environments, understand the needs of patients and staff, identify sensory opportunities and areas of greatest benefit for sensory design enhancement, and develop options for the design, implementation and sustainable benefits of sensory strategies. Quite a lot to achieve in a master's thesis. We look forward to hearing more about Carla's research in one of our future events. I'm now going to pass on to Warren to provide us with an update on the International Student Design Competition.
Thanks very much, Kate. The Australian Health Design Council is delighted to announce the results of the International Student Design Competition held to design the next generation of stroke rehabilitation centres. The competition was organised by the International Union of Architects Public Health Group and Novell Redesign Team based in Melbourne. First prize in this international competition was sponsored by the Australian Health Design Council with the aim of fostering and encouraging research and creative exploration at the intersection of health and design. The competition invited students to design a rehabilitation centre providing an innovative physical environment to meet the needs of 30 stroke survivors. 175 projects were submitted by teams from 40 different countries. I'd like to thank AHDC founder Dr. Jane Reppin-Carthy, who represented Australia as a jury member, and Ruby Lipson-Smith and Mary-Anne Barnard from the Novell design team who represented the client. Details on the 3 winners are listed in the news section on our website, with the first prize awarded to students from the Harbin Institute of Technology in China. We are currently investigating the best way to share the content developed by the winning teams with the AHDC community, so stay tuned for an announcement regarding this. Now I'll ask Isabel to provide us with an update on some forthcoming AHDC events.
So hi everyone. We had an incredible 2023 year full of events. Some of them were face-to-face and some of them were as webinars. We've done 4 webinars to date with 3 more to come. One would be in August and then September and October. And then we also have the conference, which Alison will talk more about. Just to let you know as well, so the event subcommittee curates usually the topics, coordinate with speakers. You can't hear me? Okay. So yeah, so I was saying that usually the events still no? You can't hear me? Oh, I don't think. They can. Okay, great. Sorry, I had. They can hear me. Yeah, that's all good. So yeah, so the event subcommittee usually curates the event topics and coordinate the speakers and does all the logistics pre and during and post the event to make to get the event the most successful possible. So thank you to the event subcommittee, including Alison and Dario. Also, part of the events is we do some site visits. So this year we'll have most of our site visits after following the conference, which is on the 3rd day of the conference. Alison as well is going to give a quick overview about these site visits. The other thing is the European Health Design Study Tour, which Michelle is going to give a quick overview about the current year and what's coming up in the next 3 years. So thanks everyone and hope you enjoy the event. Yeah, just sorry. So as well, David is going to give a quick overview about the podcast, and then Michelle, you're going to talk about the study.
Hello everyone, my name's David Cummins. I'm a proud member of the AHDC. I just want to start by thanking everyone for this phenomenal event. I don't think it's ever happened to have everyone in every state in person. It would have taken so much time, and I know Isabel and Alison have put so much time and effort into it, so it just has to be acknowledged because it's absolutely phenomenal. I'm personally very happy to be here tonight in person with so many people that are passionate about AHDC and design health, so thank you very much, team. I'm actually the host of the Australian Health Design Council podcast series. If you haven't heard about it, I'd love you to join. You can join on either Spotify or the podcast app. And for those of you that don't know what a podcast is, just ask someone under the age of 60. Maybe 65. But either way, the AHDC podcast is phenomenal. Personally, I'm tremendously enjoying it. It's just it's literally a hobby. I'm able to interview people around the world on the latest innovation and design trends. as most people would know, it takes about 15 to 20 years before design innovation or design health, once proven, comes into the commercial world. What the AHDC podcast app does, podcast allows people to do is actually listen to the latest research trends, whether it be in America, in England, in Iran, in Italy, in Adelaide, in Melbourne, no matter where you are. And it gives us the ability to listen and learn and understand the teachings through facts and figures, through evidence-based research and through design innovation, as opposed to just opinions, which our industry pretty much relied on for so many years. At the end of the day, we've got about 30 podcasts out at the moment. We've broken it into series. The first series was Introduction to the Board, then Women's Health. We've got a Sustainable series. We're about to release Healthcare of the Future series. We've got an ICU series, Biophilic Benefit series, Rehab series, Mental Health series. So we're able to group it into series and just interviewing people around the world. So I highly recommend people to listen to it and download it. We generally get about 1,000 listeners per podcast, and that's around the world. So very, very impressive numbers for our industry. So I just again want to say thank you, encourage you all to download, and have a good night. Thank you.
I'll pass it now to Alison, who has some overview to give us about the conference.
Hi everyone, it's Alison here. Hopefully you can all hear me. Let me know if you can't. I just wanted to introduce a little bit about the conference themes, which I'm sure everyone has read about, but to give a little bit. We wanted to design the conference themes around things that would relate to each other and contrast with each other. So that overall theme, there is no magic bullet to designing for health, is designed to focus on unique ideas and innovations rather than grand narratives or in doctor stuff. And it can be read in conjunction with our sub-themes. So as you can imagine, there's no magic bullet for designing for recovery, for designing for scale, and for designing for country. So we had a great response from our EOI for presentations. And I want to thank everyone who did submit a project or a presentation or a concept. We've included projects large and small, and we've tried to include as many multidisciplinary projects as we could, multidisciplinary presentations as we could, to capture a wide range of perspectives and to build on last year's themes of breaking down the silos. So based on that, I really hope everyone is booking their tickets for Melbourne on the 1st and 2nd, which are the primary days of the conference, and then the 3rd of November, which is the Friday site visits day. There's a very limited number of tickets to site visits, and the site visits will be by ballot. So you have a little bit of time to put your name down for them and drawn out of a hat. So you don't have to worry about being up on time for your tailored tickets, you know, in the queue. You can just log on, put your name down, and we'll let you know if you've got a spot. So we're running a single stream again, just to give everyone an understanding. Given the size and the intimacy of the Health Design Network across Australia, we felt that it was appropriate that we would all stay together as a group and hear what we have to say. So as a single stream, we have a great venue, a different venue. It's right in the heart of the city of Docklands, so it's easy to get to by tram. And it's a Wednesday, Thursday for the conference days. Wednesday night, we will have a cocktail function on site. The venue has, the space has cafes there as well, so you're very well connected. And then on Thursday night, we're really excited to announce a special event, also with our partners from Novell. So Novell will be hosting an exhibition opening and celebration on Thursday, the 2nd of November at 6:30. And they've invited us there. Thank you. The interactive exhibition will showcase the Stroke Rehabilitation Hospital of the Future and be a culmination of 4 years of the living lab and a collaboration between architects, scientists, stroke survivors, clinicians, and policymakers. So you'll have the opportunity to go and visit that, and there will be a virtual reality immersive experience, and it's a 4-minute walk from the conference. So if you're booking your tickets, please keep that in mind. Wednesday morning, we're starting bright and early at 8:30. Thursday night, we've got a lovely exhibition from Nobel, and Friday morning for site visits. Hopefully that gives you a lot to look forward to. And I also would note that it's Melbourne Cup the following week. So a lot of Melbourne people might be taking long weekends, so get your hotel booking and bookings in. That's all I had. I'm going to pass it on to Michelle. Yes, am I right?
Thanks, Alison.
Quick story about the study. Can you just stop for a second?
It's over.
The study tour 2023, we had 9 days of traveling through France and Switzerland. And this will give you a bit of an impression of where we've been and what we've seen. It was a group of Australian and New Zealand health designers, health planners, and health practitioners. A really great group that at times we added some Belgian architects, French architects, and Swiss architects. No Swiss architects. Forget the Swiss architect. No Swiss architects. Let it run. Want to say anything?
That's it.
Just stuff to come.
Okay. So it's a silent presentation.
Correct.
You look grumpy here. Nothing.
Keep on going.
And what's next? Hmm.
I don't know.
Canadian fries.
There we go.
So Mark, are you ready?
Thanks, Isabel. First of all, I wanted to say welcome to everybody to our studio here in Melbourne, also to the studios Moricon in the other cities, and the studio of Cox in Brisbane. And please make yourself at home here. I'm a health lead at BLP, and so I was lucky enough to join some of this crew at the tour in the UK, but not necessarily the leg of the tour that went to France, Switzerland, and elsewhere, it seems.
France and Switzerland.
France and Switzerland. Okay, so it sounds a little bit like it could be as much a food tour as this a health architecture tour, and I think we're all quite envious as we return back on our planes back to work. So tonight I'm going to introduce the three speakers. I think we're going from south to north up the east coast today. Our first speaker is Alessandro. Alessandro is speaking from the Melbourne studio. Alessandro's a senior associate at BLP, and Alessandro and I are working very closely on a large project here at Footscray Hospital. He has a lot of experience in health facilities over the last 20 plus years. I'm looking forward to seeing what he spotted out of France and Switzerland. Then we're moving up to Sydney to our Oricon's studio there, where Tracy Lord's going to take you through her learnings from the tour as well. And of course, she was lucky enough post-tour to then attend a conference in Copenhagen where she was giving a presentation there at the UIA Public Health Group conference. So expect to see something from her. Quite Scandinavian. And then we're moving further up the highway up to Tonya, who's in sunny Brisbane, who will no doubt tell us about all the sunshine she experienced in Europe, and then I think an extended time in the sunshine in Portugal. So I might hand across to Alessandro first of all, and thank you.
Great, thanks, Mark. Sorry.
Tell me when you're.
Oh, sure. Yes, ready. Look, we've timed the slide, so they might be a bit fast, but so Isabel, you might have to pause. We'll see how we go. So firstly, this is the crew, and I think on our second day. So the presentation that Tracy, Tonya, and I have put together is really a series of, I guess, themes, observations, and musings, and we tried to organise all those into some sort of 3 themes that we can look at. Sort of really demonstrating our impression. It's really about first impressions, which is what you get when you're storming around hospitals at 100 miles an hour, and we saw quite a few. I'm looking at natural light and ventilation, sort of how that translates through the lens of building typology, patient rooms, other spaces in hospitals. And we're moving. Okay. So typology. So this was the central, I won't pronounce it in French, the hospital, central hospital in Rennes. So the typology here is sort of, you can see a campus language of courtyard buildings. The O-shaped building at the top is a historic building, and they're sort of continuing. Oops, sorry. Maybe we made the mistake of timing too fast. Thank you. And you can see the courtyard building language is being repeated in the new buildings in orange and the 2 grey at the bottom there. And that building at the bottom of the page there, the sort of square with the 4 courtyards, is the one that we walked through. It's sort of partway through construction. So that sort of campus language of courtyard supports natural light and ventilation. And you see the courtyard typology is quite a common one that we came across in both France and Switzerland. Thank you. Geneva. So this is the basically the Juilliard building of the Geneva Hospital. So HUG is the acronym for the Geneva Hospital. And here, you can see it's quite a standard plan, sort of a ward block, but they've got cutouts and voids that step back, which bring natural light into the circulation and corridors. And then this is the Medipole in Lyon. So again, a courtyard building typology, 3 courtyard buildings linked together. And there's a sort of hospital street where light reinforces sort of natural wayfinding and circulation through the building. And then a slightly less successful typology here. You can kind of see in the figure ground there on the right that the hospital, the new building there is the 2 sort of rectangle with the small courtyards. The campus typology is more one of a kind of U-shaped typology and narrow footprint to maximize natural light. This one was a bit more compromised. Sorry. Thank you. Where the courtyards are quite small, didn't really leverage off its of that typology to sort of organise itself around circulation. So it was quite difficult to get around. And I guess I think the team would agree, not really intuitive in terms of wayfinding or I guess wayfinding around the building. Thank you. And then patient rooms. So what we saw a lot of actually was natural light, natural ventilation and openable windows combined with the standardised facade module. And here at REM, it sort of offered both an openable portion of the window that was basically up behind a solid panel that then had a safety screen. So it meant you could open that portion fully without compromising safety. You don't have to deal with the sort of BCA issues that we have here about minimal or maximum opening. And then that system there, again, was standardized and it sort of incorporated wardrobe, patient storage, and sort of bench seat for the patients. So we saw quite a lot of that sort of standard setup in hospitals. This was actually the Child and Adolescent House at Geneva. It's probably the most beautiful hospital building we saw on the trip. You'll see lots of natural materials, timber. It's actually an adolescent mental health, child and adolescent mental health facility. And there, obviously the use there of natural light through really the same means. You can see they had the openable portion there, but in this case, natural materials and timber are used. Thank you. And And then here sort of in Geneva, so the hospital we saw before with the cutouts and the outdoor areas, it's really using that same system where they had, again, the openable window behind a solid panel, but maximizing that natural light by that window. A lot of this was supported by the fact that a lot of the hospitals didn't have air conditioning. They rely on mechanical ventilation and obviously different types of heating. So it means it's a bit easier, I guess, for them than it is for us. Cute. And this was the Lausanne Children's Hospital. So again, another hospital under construction that we visited. Really maximising the use of that area around the window, again with the built-in bed. You can see the openable portion. That's part of the facade with the mesh screen. Sorry, Isabel. And then you can see that expression on the outside of the facade, but quite a simple sort of facade expression. Again, really, in this case, designing from the inside out rather than outside in. And then some other areas, the top right there is actually a sort of kitchen or kitchen classroom in the Adolescent Mental Health Hospital, which is again quite beautifully finished with nice stainless steel and timber. And some other spaces there in the Medipol private hospital, which is actually a part Ramsay-owned private hospital in Lyon, with breakout spaces, again, with access to natural light and the courtyards. Thank you. And obviously circulation spaces are key. Generally, most of these places had windows or large picture windows at the end of the corridors to bring in light, but also supporting distant views into courtyards and other landscaped areas. And again, thank you, Isabel. The sort of most beautiful one we saw was really about, I guess, the warmth of the light that came in. You can see it was quite a gloomy day outside in Geneva on that day, but that sort of timber and the fact that you had sort of the layering of windows and natural light, so you could see through one space into another and externally, I think really supported that sense of, I guess, being a welcoming space and a sort of more domestic feel. And then just some random observations that kind of made us a bit envious in a way. Sorry. Thank you. So this was France and Switzerland. So again, just a note for if there are any engineers in the room. And I guess I was on high alert for some of these things, given some project issues that we're having at the moment. They had quite clean, sort of quite clean finished ceilings. You can see there aren't many services or lights or air conditioning registers, so they managed to keep those quite clean. And then just, the extensive use of natural materials and conditions. And I think that's Tracy.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and talk as fast as I can because these slides seem to be going very quickly. One of the things that we noticed was that whereas we put quite an emphasis on patient bed heads in Australia, that in France and Switzerland, they didn't really have an emphasis on them. The services were very much standard GPOs, standard single gas outlets. It was really a little bit of decoration, but there was no overworking of that patient bed head. So this was St. Joseph's Maternity Hospital in Paris. We found the same thing in the Medipol private hospital, very much standard GPOs, standard single gas outlets, and a simple light. A little bit more emphasis placed at the foot of the bed, but certainly not the working and detail that we find in our patient bed heads. And even the most beautiful ones that we saw in Switzerland, again, it was fairly simple, straightforward. Just the medical services panel across the bed head, and that was it. The children's house in Geneva was the one that had a little bit more, but obviously as a mental health centre that didn't have the gases, so they used it as a shelf for patient belongings and patient identity for the room. Again, the Children's Hospital in Lausanne, they were looking at options for the bedhead, but it was really about the type of medical services panel rather than any decoration on that patient bedhead. One of the really interesting things we saw in both France and Switzerland was the way that the staff bases were done, which was kind of I felt a backward step, was that all of the staff bases were behind glass. We asked a lot about what was going on. So this is the maternity hospital in Paris, even the maternity hospital. And we asked about, how do patients access the staff? And it's like, oh, well, the staff have got things that they need to be doing. So I don't know what they needed to be doing. And some of the comments were that, they have, because the buildings aren't sprinkled, that they need to be. It's okay. You can just keep going with the timing. That because you're behind the glass because of some of the smoke requirements, but that didn't seem to be reasonable. The reception desk here that we've got, they said they don't use it at all. All of their staff are located behind windows, and in some cases where they were clear windows, they'd actually come up and put sheets of paper and film across, so that yeah. So, and this is the mental, the youth and adolescent mental health hospital, the Children's House in Geneva, and again, the staff were behind a glass wall, which was really a significant change from the way that we do things in Australia, which we thought was actually probably a step back. Access to other things. One of the things that we really noticed was those other spaces, so not just the standard spaces that have been scheduled out. And we found that some of the hospitals did that very well. Some of them didn't do it as well. Seems like longer than 20 seconds. Here we go. So this was the maternity hospital in Paris. This is their gym. As you can see, it was a leftover space, so they shoved a couple of treadmills and a piano in. So it was a bit of an afterthought, whereas some of the other hospitals thought about it a bit more, but this was one of the ones that wasn't quite as well. The Medipol private hospital, all of the waiting spaces were, as you can tell, there was a theme going on, and it was reasonably well curated, but again, it was kind of the leftover spaces that were where this attention was paid. The one that was outstanding, you might want to pause on this one, Izzy, for me. So the Children's House in Geneva was just beautiful. There's no other way to talk about it. It had so the image on the left is the waiting area. As Al spoke about, there was this kitchen where they have cooking classes for the students, for the patients, and so they can actually they look at it more as learning and education rather than just mental health. It's attached to the university, so the lecture theatre. The red chairs, the students have lectures there. So what they do when there's no students there is actually use it as a movie theatre for the inpatients. So just these beautiful ideas about how to double up on spaces. They also have an indoor basketball court, which was just spectacular. And they link that to the school that's across the road. So there's a real connection between the community and what's happening in this building. And then the Children's Hospital in Lausanne, which was one of the few spaces we saw in a children's hospital that actually had accommodation for the parents at the bedside, which we were a little bit shocked about, that not all of the rooms in children's hospital and maternity hospitals allowed for partners or parents to actually be in the bedrooms. So that was, again, something that we thought was a bit backwards compared to where we were. Another really interesting thing we saw that was very different, markedly different between France and Switzerland was the architectural focus and what they focused on. It may have been just because of the type of architect we were talking to, and some of the projects were a little bit. So what we found, the maternity hospital in Paris was very much a focus on the facade and the play of light and shade in the facade and how they looked at the articulation of the facade. Again, in Reims, was this beautiful, absolutely beautiful looking building. But again, the emphasis was on what was going on with the facade and how they broke down the bulk of the building and those kinds of things, which are important, but we didn't get the narrative about about anything else apart from the elevations. This is the Pavilion H Hospital in Lyon, which we thought was probably the worst one we saw. It's in a historic site, so the architecture very much was paying homage to the buildings that were around. It's all very heritage listed, so there was a lot of constraints, but it was quite a difficult one to really see the appeal of being a patient in that space or a staff member in that space. Thanks, Izzy. We can probably speed up a bit now. And again, so when we got to Switzerland, it was a very different conversation. It was about patient journeys. It was about patient experience. It was about how patients move through the space, how patients experience the space. There's beautiful little inlays in the floor. So it's very much a difference between France and Switzerland about how they were designing the hospitals. And the Lausanne Children's Hospital that we saw was the same. It was all about patient journeys, getting courtyards, getting parents to look after their children, where the parents could cook meals and those kinds of things. So a very marked difference between France and Switzerland. Which we definitely thought the Swiss experience was much better. So now I'm going to hand over to Tonya in Brisbane.
Hi everybody. I'm going to talk about staff spaces, and this is something that came up in the conference, and it's obviously something that we're all talking about in Australia as well, how to retain staff and how we need to actually spend a lot more time and energy on those spaces. So I've just looked through some of the hospitals that we visited. St. Joseph's Hospital in Paris, they had a real campus feeling to it. So I guess when we were there in summer, it was quite wonderful to see staff members all outside enjoying the place. And if you could stop on this one for a little bit, do you mind going back on that one? Sorry. This campus had, it's sort of like St. Vincent's, I suppose, the old, that it had a sort of cathedral space in the middle, and that was once upon a time on the top of the hill. So all of this, the rest of the campus has all been created as a transit level at level 3, and then there's sort of an under area, and there are hillscapes. So it's got a really interesting topography, and based on its history of having this cathedral on the hill. So yeah, it's a wonderful campus to see staff members using all of the green spaces, but I'm wondering what it would be like in winter with all that open transit space. Thanks a lot. Tracy's already talked about this, that in St. Joseph's also that there was really a thing of no open workstations, no open joiner anywhere. When we walked out to the lift, we could have been anywhere if we didn't know actually where we were. And also, but from their point, from the staff members' point, they felt they had privacy for their workspace, and they also had, you can keep going, Izzy, I'll try and keep up with it. They had little staff retreats on every level, which is something that we're probably not doing so much anymore. And they had these little sort of bed spaces as well in each of those. But they did say that staff's privacy was really of importance to them. Keeping on going. Oh yeah, so WOW's outside rooms. So really it was about floor staff being on floor, nowhere at a staff base or back in the workroom. And there was no in between of those zones. So yeah, bit of wayfinding there. And obviously, can we keep going, Izzy? Or is it just on the 22nd? Oh yeah, and you can see here in I can't say that, Tracy. the corner workrooms, which were quite lovely, and you can see again that ventilation detail. So the same facade detail everywhere meant that you got that natural light and ventilation and views to these corner workrooms, which are in stand-up prop zones, and then you just have the computers in the corners. But really, really simple, and not much spent on joinery as we would see here. Keeping on going. And same with Geneva back, sorry. No, it's okay. Thanks. And that was again what Tracy talked about before about staff stations not really being used, but the glass space behind being more used in that area. you want to click on. Thanks, Izzy. Ta. But I guess one that I really got a lot out of was this Jean Nouvel design, the Institute Imagine, which is it's a research facility. So it's more like what our research facilities are for Sydney Kids or for MCRI at Royal Children's. So the ground floor is all consulting suites. And would you mind staying back on that one, Will? Thanks, Izzy. Ta. The ground floor is all consulting suites, but what you get is an openness through all the research labs up above, and so that gives you that sound of children through the whole space, which I think is a pretty wonderful thing for researchers to be connected to. You might only have a few children coming to this space, but they're actually really important to everybody's projects that they're working on. And the other thing that we could see was that natural light was abundant, so much so that the architect taking us around could say that half the lights were on, and in all the labs the lights weren't on. So this area was a garden space with really simple seating around it, but it felt quite simple and playful. Yeah, maybe keep going on. Thanks. So you can see the lab spaces here. Yeah, no lights on in there, no lights needed at all, and it felt really simple and workable. But also your views out into all these other beautiful old buildings of Paris. So you've got a very new constructed building. You can see also in the background, that's all right, I'll keep going on. They had all the walkways between all the research labs are open with this glass balustrade, which some people found a little bit scary, but I love heights. And they have these little breakout spaces between at different junction spots on different levels. And I think that really sort of keeps that feeling of sort of collegiate feeling between labs rather than them all being separate. But yeah, you can see those lights were off. And then the creme de creme, the staff dining function space up on the top floor, which is, it's really cool. It's got this great terrace space, but it's also got an amazing view all around Paris. So you're picking out all of the, there's the Eiffel Tower. Oh, there's Montmartre. It's beautiful. And yeah, it had a very kind of, I'd say a little bit odd, the artwork patterning through it, where they had ceiling details. If you look back at the ceilings, it's like someone had decided to get the architectural ceiling plan and paint it on the ceiling offset or something. Anyway, you'll see that later. Oh, so I just wanted to say that this kind of thing is actually probably more in line with what we've all been working on in Australia about lifting that collegiate feeling with staff in hospitals. And so an example of that for us is currently what we're working on at Footscray, but also, oh yeah, look, you can see the Eiffel Tower in the very background there. Yeah, deck chairs and stuff. But also back onto that point, Al, you mentioned about detailing. There's some pretty shoddy detailing in this one. The decking and stuff and the flooring going internal, there wasn't a very good waterproofing between those. So, fantastic architecture let down by a little bit of, value management maybe. But, it just shows you that it happens everywhere. It's not just us, all right? Do you want to keep going? Thanks. Yes. Oh yeah, so just to show you that that's that kind of thing that we picked out and thought, oh yeah, that's similar to Perth Kids where we worked on the staff club, and same with looking at so it's sort of a phenomenon that we're all used to in education and we're all used to here. So I sort of felt that Jean Nouvel had something to do with that. You can keep going, thanks. Infection control. I know you've all been waiting to hear about this, haven't you? What are they doing in infection control in Europe? Well, you know what? They don't wear masks. None of them. Nobody wore a mask in any hospital we went to. So it seems that they've all forgotten about that. And that was really, really surprising. So you can see here, oops, oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. So generally, there was a push in France, they were saying, for single bedrooms, more single bedrooms than they used to have in all of their new hospitals. They had their 2 bedrooms, the double bedrooms on the corners here. They also had handrails to both sides of the corridors in this building, and they typically had floor vinyl cove to everywhere. They also had, in the maternity, they had integrated basins everywhere. So Corian was a general sort of typical. But the other thing we noticed everywhere was sliding doors to en-suites. It's very common in Europe, and a lot of them were done with compact laminate and stuff, and they were really stable. We were asking, did they have any problems with that, with infection control or with maintenance? No, all fine. And the only place in this, they didn't have any hand wash basins in corridors, and they didn't have any hand wash basins in bedrooms. They just had them in the workroom and in the consulting rooms. And this is an interesting one. In a double bedroom, you have a double basin. I know. The things we notice. What else have we got there? Oh, yeah, and you can see the little integrated towel rail into that, Corian, that was pointed out to us. Keeping on going, you see? Yeah, thanks. Geneva also, they actually did have a basin in the bedroom spaces, which I think has been done quite nicely within that ensuite box. And that had their PPE and their waste area incorporated. It sort of made that station area just outside the bedroom space for nursing staff. What's that? And what else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, no handrails in passages in Geneva either. So they had a lot more space for storage and setting in linen bays and things like that all into the walls. So it's a cleaned up space. En-suites. The difference between these are in Paris, we saw in St. Joseph's, we saw modular en-suites used, and they were all really small compared to our en-suites. And they had also then in the other ones there, you could see that they had, vinyl cove, but in Switzerland, they were into tiles on all surfaces. I thought it was really interesting that the mental health adolescent space has quite a lot of ligature points there in the bathroom as well. What's that? No, we wouldn't do that here. So this is all I was doing, spotting the differences. And if anyone else can spot any others, let me know. Oh yeah, ceiling tiles in the bathrooms as well. Moving along. Yeah. 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 Toilets. So you've got to have the floor coved up underneath and the toilet's wall hung. Yeah. Okay. This is I think this might be the last one as well. We didn't see very many bed curtains and bed curtain tracks. We did see a lot more of the patient retractable screens, and that kept the ceiling all kind of clean and everything, but also probably it might be an environmental reason why they're not having disposable curtains and they're not having linen and things like that. But generally, most places we saw the retractable screens used between patient bed areas. I think that's it. And if you want to roll back to Al, maybe, yeah. Any questions and answers from Mark Mitchell's team?
Thanks, Donna. I think that's great.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we have our process with our Mentimeter to try and capture any questions that might come up. And I'm sure Isabel will help me in reading those if they come up. But I might just start with questions if we could. I heard the discussion, I think it was from Tracy, talking about to put things into very broad boxes, the French being a little obsessed with the facades of the buildings and the Swiss more with the patient journeys. And I guess that's sometimes as designers, that's the kind of the push and pull that we're always looking at, is how to try and perfect what's needed on the inside and then how does it represent what we want to show to the world on the outside. Was there any places where you saw that had been really well managed, both the inside and the outside coming together?
Look, I thought, Mark, what was really interesting was, you might tell we had a bit of a bias towards the Swiss projects. We thought that they were just a little bit more well-rounded. And certainly, while the Swiss architects were talking a lot more about the patient journey and the patient spaces, the facades were beautifully detailed and beautifully designed. And, you know, I mean, the Children's House project, the outside of it was just as beautiful as the, I'm going to say it again, guys, sorry, as the project in ours. But it wasn't the focus of the architects. They were very much talking about the patient experience. And the same with the Children's Hospital in Lausanne. While the architects were mostly focused on what was going on inside, the very simple way that the facade was detailed with a little bit of colour and those openable panels that we saw everywhere. They were spending just as much money on the facade as the French, but it certainly wasn't the focus of the hospital design. And I will say that may be just because of the architects that we were speaking to, that perhaps they were more focused on that, and they'd been working in conjunction with other architects. But it was very much a marked difference between the two countries.
Yeah, I just back that up with too. When we spoke with life designers who worked on St. Joseph's in Paris, they mentioned to us that a lot of their work was also in the Middle East and in Africa, and they were doing probably more adventurous work there than they were in France.
Thank you. Well, I've got some of the questions. We've got 7 questions at the moment. 8 questions have come up at the moment. So I'll read out the first one, which has come through. It says, based on the examples you viewed, would you say that the AUSHFGs overprescribe services requirements in patient rooms? Al, you haven't spoken yet. Did you want to have a look at that one?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a very interesting question. Actually, we asked on a few of the tours whether they had equivalent guidelines and systems. And I think generally the answer was no. They don't really work to the same rules or guidelines. Obviously, they have building regulations, etc. But in terms of health design, they don't really have those rules. And I think, in a way, it does help lead things to interpretation. So I guess the answer is no. They don't really have that same prescriptive.
Any other thoughts from others who were on the tour?
I'm not going to talk against the health facility guidelines. That's for a very different discussion. I think it was interesting in that it allowed for the architects to use their experience a little bit more. So in some contexts there was additional power. In others there was power and data, and in other spaces there was less. I think it was really interesting that not all of them had the extensive user group processes that we did. Sorry, I might be answering questions that haven't been asked yet. But certainly in Switzerland, they were talking a lot about the discussions with the user groups. But in France, it was more that we know what we're doing. We've done this before. So it was very much based on their experience as designers, and rather than any real discussion with the user group or standard guidelines.
Yeah, I'll just sort of suggest also, again, back to that point about not having so much joinery in rooms. It did seem that joinery was based around the window space and that ventilation and the cupboard spaces and things like that, whereas it was quite minimal around the bed itself, and just using a standard, panel put in, so you could probably adapt that. And sometimes I think we spend a lot of time with user groups on all these parts, and we found in Europe they didn't even look at it at all, so it was interesting.
The next question is about natural ventilation, and a comment that someone has written is about loving the idea of natural ventilation. Truly believe it's something we lack typically in Australia for healthcare. Question about how do they typically get around safety, infection control, operations and temperature control of the hospital with natural ventilation?
So, look, I guess in terms of safety, you probably saw that generally those standard modules had either a mesh screen or a perforated aluminium screen, so that they had that built-in safety, again, which means you could open the window, or open the panel, sorry, to a large extent, to get that fresh air without compromising safety. In the mental health unit, they also did say that that was a lockable panel in case, depending on the patient profile, they might need to do that. Infection control, particularly in these patient spaces, I guess wasn't the top of their list. You can probably tell by the fact that they didn't have hand basins and other kind of things in those spaces. So I think that was maybe a secondary concern. In terms of mechanical ventilation, as I said, they tended to not, a couple of them anyway, the Metropole in particular, didn't have air, so it only had mechanical ventilation. So that, I guess, makes it a bit easier potentially than just dealing with air conditioning system.
I was just going to add to that was that the locking system of that standard module of window also, if it was connected to air conditioning ever, would just immediately turn off as soon as you move the handle, the air conditioning goes off. So, I think it can be controlled. I think it's something we should probably look at a bit more in our. And it did seem like the modular system was the way that they were able to get it through, rather than all this, rather than the custom part of it. So, yeah. And I sort of noticed those actually more on lots more buildings than just hospitals. That same modular system.
We had a second question locally here, which was about how do they control the temperature of the room with the ability to open the windows. Anyone spot that one on their travels?
I think they don't.
They don't.
So that's that patient.
Yeah.
Climate.
Although we talk about it.
Yeah, good point, John. It's the Northern Hemisphere. but actually it was quite hot when we were there. So,
It was
yeah.
bloody warm.
Lyon is in the south of France. In summer, it will get as hot as it does here in London.
But I think they value the patient experience in that. I guess kind of like when you walk into a hotel room and you realise you can open the window, you kind of
Yes.
get a sense of joy versus just, in a sealed room. So I think they kind of prioritise that in a way over temperature control. And I guess they've got the luxury maybe of slightly different climate as well.
It's
I was almost
interesting.
going
Sorry, Mark. It's interesting that air conditioning isn't really used so much through France anyway. So it's almost like the patients that are in the hospital don't have that experience of air conditioning when they're outside of the hospital, so they don't seem to expect it inside the hospital. But it's much more about that natural ventilation and being able to use that to control the temperature. They do have heaters. A lot of the rooms had heaters in there for when it gets colder, but certainly not solid air conditioning in most.
Thanks, Tracy. I'll keep taking these along. The next one was, how much do you think the model of care influences the architecture? Is there room for architecture to influence patient care? Love that question. Anyone want to try and tackle that one?
Yeah, okay. It was really interesting. I thought I'm going to go back to the Children's House project in Geneva just because it was beautiful. And I think the way that they looked at the model of care there and the way they treated their patients as guests and as looking at opportunities for the patients to actually interact with other groups from the outside and with university students. The other thing I didn't mention, they had a radio station where the kids could do podcasts from the hospital. So it was really about that model of care of how do you actually look after children and adolescents in a different way that informed what the building was. And I think it was really strong in that building. And it's some of the others, it was probably less so in say the French models. It was really just, we've done this, so we're going to do it again.
So Tracy, I hope you suggested that they all log on to David's podcast. I highly recommend.
Yeah. Well, there's a nice little segue there into a podcast. Yes, we could perhaps link into the Children's House podcast.
Actually, it was a professional radio studio that was also used by the local radio station.
Yeah.
Fantastic. This one I'm going to throw to Tonya, knowing her passion for materials. There's a question here about the clean corridor ceilings were great. What was the material, if you recall, and where were all the services?
The metal pan ceilings. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
I think so.
Most corridors had perforated metal pan ceilings, so the services could be up behind that, I suppose. But yeah, it was pretty clean the whole way through. Yeah, and we didn't see, I guess, that much sort of the ceiling grid plasterboard. We didn't see that stuff all through, but we did see I think in Geneva, was it different there, Al? Because I didn't get to there. Was it was the ceiling the aluminium louvers? What's that?
In the children's house or the?
No, the other one, Geneva Uni.
No, that was still a metal pan.
That's metal pan.
Perforated, but
Yeah.
the children's house was sort of a pressed fibre.
Oh, straw board,
But
like
it
a
was-
Stramit.
Yeah,
is it?
yeah. But it
Yeah.
was kind of butt jointed, so it wasn't sort of in standard tiles. But it was
Yeah.
interesting. But it's worth noting they don't sprinkler their hospitals.
Yeah.
So there's obviously one service already that's kind of missing.
That was actually, you're right. That's probably the huge difference is no sprinklers, and that's what they were talking about with their work areas all being behind glass, etc. Yeah.
Which is the perfect segue to the next question, Tonya. Thank you for that. I was a little surprised when I saw that information around staff being behind glass, because so many times we talk to hospital users, they talk about the importance of observing patients and maximising that. So there was a question here, is staff privacy something we have to consider more in our designs, or is it the staff want to do their notes without interruptions? Was there any clues from the people you spoke to there? So Tracy?
Look, it was really interesting that that most of the time when we came across staff, they were in their staff base and not on the floor. I think the H building, the horrible heritage one we saw, there was staff walking around that building, but in most of the others, the staff were behind the glass wall and behind the closed door, writing their notes or working on their laptops. So it was really interesting. I'm not sure how much remote monitoring they used, but some of the wards actually felt quite isolating for patients, and most of the patient doors were closed as well. So it's a really different model to what we use, and I'm not sure how it works in that sense. I will say that two of the hospitals were a construction site, so we didn't really get to see how the staff would work in those spaces. But a really noticeable difference that we wanted to highlight was staff were behind a closed door working away on their laptops or their
So this is a follow-up question here about, did you observe that there was more staff needed as a result of staff generally working away from where the patients were?
Look, one of the things they did say was that they are facing absolute workforce shortages. They don't have enough staff, and some of the hospitals actually had wards that weren't being used because of those staff shortages. And we have the same problems here, obviously. But it was really interesting because we're in Europe and they've got a much bigger pool to draw from, and yet they were still saying that they don't have the staff. So I'm not sure if the staff were kind of in different locations and we just didn't, see that they had more staff. But I think they were all kind of focused together, and the staff were more interacting with each other rather than with the patients.
Isabel wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, that's an observation from the Paris Children's Hospital. So what I saw is like the staff station had already the big windows, but then the big windows were blocked by posters. So as if it's intentionally not to be disturbed. So as if they had the model where they wanted to be visible, but then there was kind of a change of model because this is an old hospital. It's not as new as the others, but then they blocked the windows around intentionally as a change in their model or maybe workforce as well. But just this observation.
And you wandered around pretty much with no one stopping you.
Yeah. So the Necker Hospital that we kind of snuck in to have a look around, and Izzy walked up to the patient floors and no one stopped her. There was no one to say, what are you doing?
I'd add on to that too. There wasn't sort of that meet and greet that we have so much more in and even the volunteers and things that we would have at hospitals in that way. I think, we just seem to have a lot more of that no hidden patient kind of policies and things. And it didn't seem to be an issue there. That wasn't their concern. It was nursing behind and writing up things, but also using the wows alongside the patients in the rooms. And we just didn't see many staff around corridor spaces at all. Like they were corridors, they weren't workspaces.
Yeah, the line of sight from corridors or staff stations probably wasn't an issue or consideration at all, which, you know, for us hospital planners takes up a lot of our time. So it was interesting that that really didn't come up at all.
Next question I've got is for you, Al. It comes through that said, we'd like to know more about the courtyard building you mentioned at the beginning of not being great. What do you think was missing in that design?
Couldn't find any detailed floor plans, but I think difference, obviously the courtyard typology was quite common, but I think one of the key differences was that the circulation wasn't organised around courtyard edges, so you didn't get that advantage of wayfinding of natural light in those corridors. And also the courtyards got smaller as you went up the building. The meant was a bit more limited in terms of
Smaller.
yeah, so the courtyards at the top actually got smaller. The voids at the bottom were bigger, which is counterintuitive, but I'm sure they had lots of pressures on planning.
Next question that's come up is, but anyone to answer, I guess, is it known that the Swiss hospitals were private or public?
Public.
All public.
Public, all
Right.
public. They just seem to have a lot more money. It was interesting. Geneva was hideously expensive. And when we went to Lausanne, they said, oh yeah, the Geneva hospitals are really nice because they spend more on their hospitals. And you could certainly notice that in some of the detailing, but it wasn't always expensive stuff. It was just beautifully detailed, you know, and well considered. And I think that was really noticeably different. But no, the Swiss hospitals were all public.
Leads me to the next question, which was one about, did anyone give you any insights around what the cost per room or per square metre was between the different hospitals, the private versus the government ones, and perhaps between the different countries?
I think we're still waiting for that PDF
yeah.
to be sent to us, actually.
Right.
There's some information coming, but not in particular. No. What was really interesting was the bedroom sizes and the bathroom sizes. As Ton said, the bathrooms were much smaller, and I don't think the bedrooms were as big as ours were either. So that was kind of an interesting position. But then they didn't have, because they didn't have a hand wash basin in the bedrooms, it actually allowed more circulation around the beds. So they didn't have some of the constraints that we do.
Yeah, I think the bathrooms would have been about 4 and the bedrooms were often about maybe 10.5. They weren't sort of very big at all.
No.
They were really tight, and you could see when they had the patient chair near the services, there was actually no room whatsoever to get around it.
I'm sure if those discussions were had here about taking hand wash basins out of bedrooms, there'd be a lot of discussion. So the next question was about user groups and design briefs, how they were constructed. Did you know much about whether they were very influential in the design? Was there much discussion in that process?
Look, as I said, in Switzerland, they certainly talked a lot about the user group process. It wasn't as common in France. It was really, we've done this before, we'll do it again. It was, what was absolutely consistent in both countries, though, was the difference in infection control. The fact that they didn't have hand basins at, you know, points along the corridor or within patient bedrooms. The only place we saw places for the staff to wash their hands were at the staff base. So it was noticeably different. And when we asked about it, they just went, you know, it's not required. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were just saying hand sanitizer is what they're using in rooms. And there was something else I was going to say on that, Tracy, about the hand wash basins, but I've completely forgot. So keep talking, everybody else.
I've got another question for you, Tom, while you're thinking. A really nicely worded question here is about, is there a case for rudimentary simplicity rather than overworking the design solution? I think that's probably going to be some nods for you. Yes. And maybe it's about letting the occupants create the walls. It's a really nice way of looking at the sorts of spaces where patients are cared for. Are there any comments from anyone about that?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you sometimes. Sometimes we sort of draw drawings that are empty without occupants in them, and it did seem there was a feeling of simplicity to, and like I said, I was really quite I loved the lab spaces that Institute Imagine, and felt that there is something about that that people activate things rather than a whole lot of finishes and surfaces and stuff like that. So and definitely the views and those windows and that being able to open it, that was great. You know, that was really a lovely feeling, and you could imagine a family doing that when they wanted to smell the outside air of a beautiful countryside. So you know, I think we should probably not overload all our interior renders and things with a still picture, as if that's how it will always be. So yeah, I really quite enjoyed the simplicity.
Got a couple more to go before we can hand back. But this is another one for you, Tom, being about interior material. The comment made about in the circulation areas in Geneva, is the block parquetry real wood? And if so, how do they maintain and resurface it?
In the children's mental health one, it is real timber, I believe. I didn't get there, but but it's mental health, so it's not the same infection control issues that we have in acute surgical wards. So, do you want to add anything to that, Al?
Yeah, it was real carpentry. In fact, they had to I think they had to change their suppliers due to the war in Ukraine. So they were talking about that. But I guess because it's mental health, obviously there aren't beds or multitude of trolleys going through the corridor. And it is brand new, so it'll be interesting to visit it in the Europe.
Something else we did see. Oh, sorry, Tracy. We did see a lot of timber framed interior windows, door frames, and stuff like that inside as well. So it was, that's pretty nice. Yeah.
I thought one of the things I thought with both the French and the Swiss hospitals was that it's going to sound terrible, but their maintenance regimes were a lot better than we have. So their cleaning staff weren't afraid to clean tiles. Their cleaning staff weren't afraid to clean timber. And so it wasn't just vinyl. You know, they were able to use other materials because their maintenance regimes actually allowed them to use those materials. So I think that was done really well.
Conscious of time, I've got 3 more questions for you. This one I'll hand to Al, which was again about bedheads and about considering things like medical gases and suction, task lighting, and patient entertainment for bedheads. How did you see that being well? Did you see that being well put together in particular hospitals?
That's a very detailed question. Well, I think our general observation around bedheads, which I think Tom touched on, was really that they didn't labour over them too much. So, you know, there wasn't the laminated bed head and the sort of bed bumper. It was really a rudimentary, you probably saw, looked like a sort of Medicon surface mounted medical service panel that sort of faded into the background. So I think the purpose there was to be as functional as possible rather than, I guess, it being the design feature or the feature of the room.
Great. And we're nearly at the end. This one's for Tracy. We talked about university hospitals, designated university hospitals. Were there any particular elements that reflected the learning and education of health professionals in the facilities you saw? The U in hub is for university, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, there wasn't specifically meeting rooms or education spaces that were absolutely designated for that in any of the hospitals we saw. It was more about the campus relationships and how they were located adjacent to a university and relied on university staff and those kinds of things. So it was more a sharing of staff and intellect rather than having specific learning spaces at the bedside or within the hospital. So Al, I don't know if you had any other observations, but certainly I didn't see specific learning spaces within the wards.
No, I mean, we did visit, it wasn't in any of our slides, but I think it's called a surgical something technology.
Surgical innovation and training something. Yes.
Thanks, Trace. Yes, in that was part of Hague in Geneva. So that was sort of an institute that's sort of part of the university within the hospital, but we didn't see any specific spaces like
We
that.
did say that their training part, which we're not going to talk about.
Oh, the autopsy. that we saw.
Michelle, you were asked not to bring that up. It is, as you would imagine, it's a surgical training centre, so they use surgical pieces to work on. So they have a lot of robotics, but they also have a cadaver section. Yeah.
And the last question I've got really relates perhaps to the idea that you've all been eating and drinking your way across Europe. Did you come across any special considerations for bariatric patient treatment?
Definitely not.
Jesus,
actually.
thanks very much. No, it was. There was some of the. It was interesting. The H building in Lyon, the Heritage Building, did have some patient lifters in some of the ICU spaces, but not typically in the patient bedrooms. Yeah, so it wasn't overly noticeable in the general patient spaces.
And as we were saying, the en suites were all really small, and so no, it was definitely not as big an issue, pardon the pun, as it is here.
Despite the cheese.
So, Mark, have you finished with the questions?
I have, thank Kate.
Okay. I would like to thank our speakers this evening for their time and the valuable updates that they've shared. You will have noticed a little bit of going backwards and forwards with the slides. They were set up on the timing, but what you plan for and what you do on the night is never quite the same. I would like to also thank all of our attendees in each of the venues. Thank you very much to the events subcommittee. Isabel and team do a great job, I think, in organising these events, and it's really great. If everybody could use the QR code on the screen to provide feedback and complete the CPD questionnaire. And I have just one last announcement before you all break and have a drink and something to eat. Researchers at the University of Adelaide are undertaking a study examining the engagement of perioperative nurses in the design of operating room spaces. It's called, surprise, surprise, Operating Room Staff Experience and the Design of Operating Room Spaces. All members of the Australian Health Design Council are invited to complete an anonymous survey regarding your experience in operating room design, planning, and your interaction with operating room staff. It would be a great way to support this much needed research. A link to the survey is under the news section on our website. Our other announcements were done earlier in the evening. So please stay connected with us on social media and keep your eyes on your emails for the Australian Health Design Council updates and initiatives. And on that night, good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel.
Oh, thank you.
Fascinating.